Okay, here are the answers to task 1 from the PowerPoint, Speciation and Natural Selection. So why does the study of embryos form evidence for evolution? Well, what we see in early embryos is that from right across the animal kingdom, all vertebrates, we see the early embryos all look very similar. So, for example, they all have sort of tails and buds for the production of the various limbs. But as the embryos develop, they then lose or gain, those structures. For example, humans will lose their tail, but in an early embryo it had it, whereas our other obviously vertebrates will keep their tails. Some vertebrates like snakes will lose their limbs. However, they're there in the early embryo. So all of that is suggestive of a common ancestor. Why else would all these embryos look, the same? Particularly when features are lost from those early embryos in the adult form. Example of homologous anatomical structures, the pentadactyl limb is the best example, where we see it in different organisms being used for different purposes. So nature has adapted that pentadactyl limb and all its bones into forms like flippers and wings and hands and feet. All of that is then suggestive of natural selection acting on as a design to adapt the organism, the species, to meet its purposes. So an example of an analogous anatomical structure is, for example, how the same selective pressures have led to the development of the same kinds of solutions. So where we see wings, the example given in the PowerPoint, we see wings for flight, and evolution has then shaped those wings in similar ways, even though they've come from very different they've come from very different initial structures. The end points are similar because of the pressures have shaped those structures. Convergent evolution is a similar sort of idea to that, where we see the same selective pressures acting on organisms. We see adaptations producing the same sorts of designs. The mole was given there, and an insect that also lives in a similar environment, that can dig, needs to dig, and produces these spade or shovel-like front appendages in order to move soil. Same selective pressures, same sorts of structures seen. Miller and Urey carried out a basic start of the life experiment, where they put all kinds of molecules that were expected to be part of the primordial conditions on Earth. So, for example, kind of methane and various nitrogenous compounds that may well have been part of the in the atmosphere and in the seas at the beginning of the sort of 4 billion years ago, 4.5 billion years ago, when the Earth sort of formed and cooled. And then they kind of zapped it with electricity and ultraviolet light in order to sort of stimulate chemical reactions to occur. And then at the end of it, they analysed the products, the chemical products that were formed in this kind of soup, this mixture. And they found things like amino acids and nucleic acids form, which is suggestive of, that life could have formed from those molecules, from basic chemical reactions.